Of all the prophets in the Hebrew Bible, Jeremiah is the one who most directly tells us what it costs to be a prophet. He didn't want the job. He said so at the beginning. Alas, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. God pressed the commission on him anyway, touched his mouth, and promised to be with him. And so Jeremiah began a ministry that would last through the destruction of Jerusalem, the exile of the people, the collapse of everything he loved. A ministry in which he was threatened, beaten, imprisoned, thrown into a cistern, accused of treason, and consistently ignored. The passages we read today are called the Confessions of Jeremiah, 6 poems scattered through chapters 11 to 20, in which the prophet speaks not to the people but to God, not in proclamation but in something closer to accusation. They are among the most raw expressions of interior suffering anywhere in ancient literature. We read them today with Viktor Frankl, who knew what it was to carry a task you did not choose in conditions that give you no external support for carrying it. The most famous of the confessions is in chapter 20, and it begins, "You deceived me, Lord, and I was deceived. You overpowered me and prevailed. I am ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me." The Hebrew word translated as deceived, pititani, is stronger than the English suggests. It can mean to seduce, to entice, and to lure. In other places in the Hebrew Bible, it is used for sexual seduction. Jeremiah is saying, "You seduced me into this, and I was seduced. You were stronger than I was, and you prevailed." This is an accusation against God. Jeremiah is not being metaphorical. He is saying, I did not fully understand what I was agreeing to. The calling was presented in a way that was irresistible, and the reality of the calling turned out to be more devastating than I was told. And then in the very next breath he says, "But if I say, I will not mention his word or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot." The confession has two movements that cannot be resolved into each other, the accusation and the compulsion. You deceived me, and I cannot stop speaking your word. The calling is both a deception and an inescapable fire. He accuses God of manipulation and then admits that the manipulation is irreversible. The word is in his bones. He cannot hold it in. Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, described his own experience of carrying a task he did not choose in conditions of extreme suffering. In the concentration camp, he had lost everything: his freedom, his family, his wife was killed at Bergen-Belsen, and what he discovered in the worst possible laboratory was that the question of meaning is not answered by one's circumstances. It is answered by one's relationship to the task that is given, chosen or unchosen, in those circumstances. The person who experiences their life as meaningful does not necessarily have a pleasant life. They have a life that is oriented towards a purpose larger than their own comfort or survival. And the person who has such an orientation can endure conditions that the person without it cannot. But Frankl was careful about this. He was not offering a formula for positive thinking. He was describing something he had observed and lived, something that was real and that required genuine engagement with the actual suffering, not its denial. The meaning that sustained him was not the meaning of a comfortable theology. It was the meaning of the specific task that awaited him, the book he was going to write, the testimony he was going to give, the insight he was going to carry out of the experience if he survived. Jeremiah's word in his bones is exactly this, a specific task given to a specific person that cannot be put down even when the person is exhausted and betrayed and mocked. The fire in the bones is not comfort, but it is orientation. It is the thing that means Jeremiah is not simply suffering randomly. He is suffering for something, for the word, for the people who will not hear the word, for the city that will fall precisely as he predicted. In chapter 15, Jeremiah says, "Woe to me, my mother, that you gave me birth, a man with whom the whole land strives and contends. I have neither lent nor borrowed, yet everyone curses me." And then, remarkably, he addresses God. "You understand, Lord. Remember me and care for me. Avenge me on my persecutors. You are long suffering. Do not take me away. Think of how I suffer reproach for your sake. When your words came, I ate them. They were my joy and my heart's delight, for I bear your name, Lord God Almighty." This is the paradox of the prophetic vocation, made explicit. The very thing that is destroying him, bearing the Lord's name, eating the divine words, is also the thing that constituted his joy. They were my joy and my heart's delight. He is not simply trapped in a calling he resents. He loves what he does and is being destroyed by it simultaneously. Frankl would recognize this as the structure of genuine vocation. The calling that is the person's deepest source of meaning is also the calling that costs them most. The alignment between who one is at the deepest level and what one is being asked to do. This is not a protection from suffering. It is sometimes the very engine of suffering, because the person who does not care about their task can put it down. The person whose task is their bones cannot. Chapter 20 ends with one of the most devastating passages in all of prophetic literature. "Cursed be the day I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, a child is born to you, a son. May that man be like the towns the Lord overthrew without pity. May he hear wailing in the morning, a battle cry at noon. For he did not kill me in the womb, with my mother as my grave, her womb enlarged forever. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow and to end my days in shame?" This is not a theological statement. This is the cry of a person at the end of their endurance. The curse of the birth, the wish to have died in the womb, it is the deepest possible expression of the wish to not be, the wish to not have been given the burden that life has turned out to be. Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, knew what it was to reach this point. He wrote that in the camps there were moments when the suffering seemed to exceed any possible meaning, when the question, "Why am I still here?" had no answer that the person could find. He did not pretend these moments did not exist. He did not resolve them with easy consolation. What he said was, the meaning is not always visible from within the suffering. Sometimes it only becomes visible afterwards. Sometimes only to others, not to the sufferer. Jeremiah, cursing the day of his birth, in the cistern, beaten, imprisoned, having prophesied truly for decades to a people who would not hear, Jeremiah could not see what his suffering was for. But we, reading his confessions 3,000 years later, know something of what they are for. They are for us. The fire in his bones that he could not hold in is still burning. The confessions of Jeremiah end without resolution. The accusations against God are not answered. The questions, why was I born? Why does the land strive with me? Why did you seduce me? Do not receive a response. The fire in the bones continues to burn, and Jeremiah continues to speak. Frankl would say, this is the most honest account of the relationship between meaning and suffering that the tradition has to offer. Not the account that tells us meaning makes suffering pleasant, not the account that tells us the suffering will end or be explained, but the account of the person who carries the fire in their bones through every form of desolation, who curses the day of their birth and gets up in the next morning and speaks again, because the word is in his bones and he cannot hold it in.